How do you deal with people who monopolize conversations? What should you do when someone walks by and doesn't greet you? How do you deal with coworkers you're not very close to? Well, I'll answer these and other questions in this video. Hi, how are you? Welcome to the Etiquette and Protocol channel. I'm Juliana, a teacher and etiquette specialist. And today I'm going to make a video answering questions sent by you here on the channel. Whenever I post videos, people leave a lot of comments. And I always like to select some questions, frequently asked questions that show up here, and answer them in a video. So we already have other videos in this format here on the channel. So if you haven't already, make sure to check out our playlist too. Let's take our first question from Aline. And when you arrive in a place, greet people, and they don't respond to you, what should you do? Well, Aline, first of all, I can already tell you that these people are not polite, because ideally you should respond when someone greets you. If you arrive somewhere and turn your head pretending you didn't see, that's really very rude. Whenever someone greets you, whether you like that person or not, whether you want to have a relationship with them or not, the least we can do is greet people back. I always say that friendships are something we can actually choose. But being rude to people is really not an option. We always have to be polite to others. So saying hi, greeting someone, even if you don't like the person, is really just an act of politeness. It's an act that shows respect not only for the person, but also for the environment you're in. Greeting someone doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be friends with that person. The person you choose to be friends with can be someone you prefer. But not greeting someone is really something that's extremely rude. But what should you actually do when you greet someone and they don't respond? Well, first of all, you can try greeting that person again. So if it's a greeting that's just verbal and with gestures, right? You're just giving a wave, a smile, making eye contact and saying, "Hi, how are you?" Repeat it. But also, something I recommend you pay attention to, I think some things you can change too, is to see if you are also giving the proper greeting. Do you use a good tone of voice when you talk to someone, when you go to greet someone? Do you make eye contact? Can the person tell that they are being greeted by you? So in fact, it's really rude for the other person not to greet you. It's a huge mistake in terms of good manners, but also pay attention to your own behavior. Are they consistent with someone who truly appears present and confident in an environment? So never forget when you greet someone, whether it's just a verbal greeting with a wave or a handshake, there will be some touching like a handshake or cheek kiss, right? Never forget to make eye contact, smile, and give a proper greeting. So even a wave needs to actually be a real wave. It can't be something else. Hi, how are you, Sai? Hi, great. So be careful and also pay attention to your tone of voice. Many times we think people are being rude to us, but often we can also adjust some of our own behaviors. It's not that I think it's right for someone not to greet you. I think that's really wrong. But also notice what you can do to be greeted more by people. Continuing with the questions due, make a video about how to deal with aggressive, reactive, and overly critical people. How can you stay elegant in these situations? Well, one thing I can tell you right away is that when someone is critical, aggressive with you, or says something that offends you, remember what they say reflects more on them than on you. Try not to take those comments to heart because that can really make you feel bad. What I recommend is that you respond in a light, relaxed way if someone makes an aggressive comment, Something even a bit more humorous, So it doesn't make the atmosphere heavy and you don't end up feeling bad. For example, someone might approach me and ask, "Wow, are you an etiquette teacher? Do people still do that nowadays? Do people use it?" And then I can answer, "Wow, can you believe people still use it?" But the etiquette we're talking about today is modern, updated. It's very different from what we used to talk about in the past. So I can respond without getting upset, without taking offense, in a light and relaxed way. What I recommend is that you really don't try to react to it in a negative way, because I think it can make the atmosphere heavy and it can look bad for you too. So leave the aggressive comments and unnecessary remarks to the other person, right? Let those characteristics be for someone else, not for you who's here watching the videos. Of course, this kind of aggressiveness and negative comments is really very unnecessary. And if you're someone who has a habit of making comments about others, other people, especially in front of them, to put people down, pay close attention, because this can really distance you from others. Because people won't have much patience to tolerate this, because it's something very sensitive. And if you're with someone who's always like that, as I said, be patient. Try to handle it lightly and don't be that person who responds right away. More reactive, try to be lighter, do everything in an easier way so the environment doesn't feel heavy. Cristiane Cardozo commented. Well, it's normal in the workplace to deal with people you don't have much affinity with. What I recommend to you, first of all, is to respect these people. In a social environment, you can often choose which people you want to interact and talk with. But in a professional environment, many times you'll have to put up with some people there. These are people who sometimes are necessary for the professional environment, but they wouldn't be people you'd want to bring into your personal life, right? They aren't people who will become your friends. So I think the first thing that's important is for you to respect these people. Second point, maintain professionalism. So follow the company's guidelines, the company's processes, so that you're always seen in a good light among these people. Another thing I also recommend you do with people you're not very close to is to never stop greeting them. And when you're near these people, look them in the eye. Because eye contact is essential for you to maintain a relationship. And the person feels that you pay attention to what they say, that you are attentive to what they say. So I would also maintain eye contact, encourage greetings. And why am I saying this? Because many times, the people you don't like or don't have much affinity with, you forget to greet them. When they come to talk to you, you already make different facial expressions, look elsewhere, and I would also pay close attention to your body language when you're with these people. Because many times when you're among people you don't have affinity with, you just go. You already cross your arms, you slouch in the meeting, you spend the whole meeting totally uninterested with that face like you're fed up with the person, So be very careful with that. That's why maintaining professionalism is essential. That's why I talk a lot about having knowledge of etiquette. In social settings, it's usually easy to choose who you interact with. But maintaining good behavior with people you don't like or with whom you don't have intimacy or affinity is something much more difficult. That's why maintaining your standard of behavior and conduct will help you a lot. Really following everything I talk about here on the channel and in my courses. And speaking of the channel, right? I received a comment from Minera 2722 who said, rude people are not grateful and don't like videos they've watched and enjoyed. The like is a way to say thank you for the content you watched. I'm really happy. I loved your comment. By the way, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel because your feedback and having you follow me is always essential. But don't forget to contribute, okay guys? Give it a like, subscribe, and recommend the channel to other people. I'll be very happy. Now we will go to Yvonne Palmer's comment. And what should we do about those people we have to interact with who monopolize the conversation? Always telling the same stories we've heard a million times, and they go on and on. Sometimes they're older people and we can't interrupt them out of respect. Well, really older people. It's common, even because of life experience, sometimes not having much time to talk to other people. Sometimes because they feel the need for attention and wanting to share special moments they've experienced, right? As a way to retrieve memories, they end up telling the same story over and over again. I think that really depends on the situation and the person's age. If it's a younger person who's telling the same story again, you can even mention it to her, but it has to be done in a very gentle and polite way. And then you can say, wow, I really remember that story. You even told me before that after you went on that trip, you got lost on the way back and the bus broke down and you all had to stop somewhere else. Anyway, if you already know the rest of the story, you can gently let the person know that you know the story. This will make the person realize that you already know, so they won't keep telling it, and they'll also notice that you cared when you heard that story the first time. It's like you're showing them that the story was interesting to you, and you even kept that inside you in your memory, and now you're recounting it. That could be one way, but you need to do it gently in a light way without making it something like this. Oh, wow, it's that story you mentioned about missing the plane breaking down, having to stop halfway, and you arriving late. Anyway, be careful how are you going to do that. However, in the case of older people, I would let them talk, you know? I think it's also very important for us to listen to them. They have this need to be listened to be heard. They want to share. Many times, these are people who spend a lot of time without talking during the day. Sometimes they spend the whole day just resting, if they are really elderly people. And when these people meet special people, people who are willing to listen to their stories, they become very happy to be able to tell them again. So I would listen. But in the case of younger people, an interesting and also elegant direction could be what I mentioned here in the video. On the age issue, I saw a comment from Helena Grella here, and honestly, it made me emotional. She said, "My nearly 90-year-old father keeps repeating the same stories. I let him talk as much as he wants. I really respect what he says because one day I'll miss him a lot and he won't be here anymore." Yeah, that's exactly what understanding someone means. Etiquette is very much related to respecting other people, having empathy, and putting others first. If you notice a 90-year-old wants to relive moments and talk, they need that. Respect. One thing I'd like to say is that it's also worth paying attention. If you're not the person who keeps telling the same stories over and over, then pay attention to that. And if you have this habit, try to hold back a little because as you've seen here in the comments, people don't like it. Alan Felipe asked, "How do you behave like a gentleman?" Well, Alan, I think the content here on the channel in general will help you a lot to be considered a gentleman. But I think one thing that is essential for anyone who wants to understand about chivalry is the rules of precedence. The rules of precedence, which would be the people of greater prominence in that environment, in that situation. They are different in social settings and in professional settings. I won't discuss that aspect in the professional environment. In this video, if you want, I can make another video at another time. But about precedence rules in the social environment, the man will always be the last. First, we have the older people, then the women, and then the men. So first, the most important person in the environment is the older people, which was even discussed in the previous question. Then we have the women, then the men, okay? This is according to traditional etiquette and mainly in social settings. So to be a gentleman, one fundamental thing is to respect these rules of precedence. So for example, if a woman is walking by your side, you need to observe and protect her, so you will always let her walk. On the inside of the sidewalk and you more to the outside, closer to the street. When you are, for example, going up the stairs, you should always go up behind the woman because if she falls, you will be there to hold her. We have several little rules of precedence protocols that we follow, and they are related to chivalry. So, for example, it's pulling out a chair for a person of higher precedence, whether it's a woman or an older person. Another point is also opening the car door. A lot of these acts of chivalry end up being forgotten, but they do exist, especially in social settings. And later, if you want, I can also talk more about this, okay? But I think it's a good direction for you to follow. Of course, there are several little rules of precedence that are closely related to protocols as well, and we can discuss them a bit more. But the important thing is that you always assist and protect and give preference to people with a higher level of precedence. That's clear. Anyway, older people and women, Paula asked in which position to leave the cutlery when you finish eating. They told me to leave them like it's 20 minutes. That's correct. Yes, that's right. The 20-minute position is one option you have, but there are other options. This can vary depending on the country and the processes you use at the table, okay? This can vary a lot. I talk a lot about this topic, especially table etiquette, in my training. Table etiquette, which is a complete training for those who want to go deeper into this subject. If you have doubts about how to rest your cutlery, how to hold a utensil, how to hold a knife, a fork, a glass, or anything related to table etiquette, it's something you're curious about and want to develop, and you understand that it's important for you, be sure to join and sign up for our training using the coupon YOUTUBE on your first purchase. If this is your first purchase on our site, use this coupon for a special discount. So come join the Etiquette and Protocol Institute and become my student. I'll be very happy. Is there etiquette for how to properly eat a lunchbox at work? Yes, there is, okay? Absolutely. Table manners in general will help you in any dining situation and with any type of meal you might have. When it comes to lunchboxes, what do I recommend, okay? It's you. First, check if this lunchbox has enough space for you to eat your food there. And I would also consider if this lunchbox is too tight, you could even have another place there to serve yourself, to eat in a more elegant way. Because sometimes we eat from the lunchbox and then we eat a lot like this, everything gets really squeezed, it gets difficult, and the food turns into a mess in there. If you don't have a way to put things on a plate like I suggested, do you want to eat from the lunchbox too? One option I recommend is to use the lunchbox as if it were a plate, right? Try to eat at a table, put the lunchbox on the table and eat, okay? Don't eat like this, okay? You know, like it's a little container. Don't do that. Let's continue. So for Dalva's question, she said, I would like you to guide me in some way, right? To learn how to say no, especially to explain when you want to pay back borrowed money and at that moment you're going to be late. How can you apologize politely without losing credibility? This is Dalva from Nilopolis, Rio de Janeiro. I think Dalva's question is about how to speak. No, especially when someone tries to charge you for something you can't afford. Anyway, guys, when you have to say no in any situation, the first thing is don't be afraid to say it. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't try to make up excuses. It's better for you to always be honest. So yes is yes, no is no. Have that very clear inside yourself. And another thing I also recommend is that you don't go too much like that. No, there's no way I can give you the money, you know. Try to speak in a more delicate way, in a more subtle way, and also with a more interesting and special sentence structure. Say it to the person in a more explanatory and polite way. In fact, I've already explained in detail what the process is for you to speak, haven't I? I'll leave this video here for you to watch next as it's very well explained. And I think this question will be completely answered through this video in a much more detailed way. Well, I'll stop here. If you have any other questions, leave a comment here and I can come back and answer your question in the next video. Kisses and see you later.